video. Welcome back, me, future me. Okay. I'm not sure what to talk about here. It's a little late and I didn't want to push it any further, but while I had a good day, I realized how easy it is for me. I've mentioned this many times to just get sucked into something stupid and end up wasting my time. I was doing more thinking and researching about economies and how they work and all this kind of crap. And so I was thinking about like minimum wages and all this stuff that I was talking about in a couple videos ago. But anyway, I'm not going to talk about that other than to just say that I got to catch myself when I do stuff like that. I've definitely got some mild form of ADHD where I just start looking into something that I find interesting and reading about it, and next thing I know, it's been 2 hours have gone by. Anyway, first of all, with the game, one thing I wanted to talk about that I didn't mention recently, I have been talking about how I've been redoing the dialogue and rewriting a lot of the dialogue and getting better ideas of how I want to voice the character and write the character for Genyu as well as the other characters. And the one aspect of the dialogue system I did not talk about, though, is the choices that you make as a player. And I want to make some changes there as well. So right now, the way it works is every time you're presented with a dialogue choice, you have three options. The first one is like a good guy, stereotypical character. The middle is like a disciplined warrior type of character. And the third one is the arrogant, cocky guy. And as you make these choices throughout the game, you get points under the hood into each of these personality types, and then the idea is eventually at certain points in the game characters react to you differently depending on what kind of personality type you had. Now, one of the major problems with this system that somebody pointed out in a piece of feedback, but which I was aware of at the beginning and I didn't think was too big of a problem, because I feel like this is kind of an issue in almost any game that gives you dialogue choices, where you can in one moment act like one kind of person and the next moment do something completely different. And this person was saying that it felt like your character has an identity crisis. But I do think that that's exaggerated in my game in particular, because not only can you make drastically different choices in terms of how you're interacting with the characters, but the actual choices themselves are specifically written to be different personalities completely. So it's not just like a moral choice or something like that. The whole tone of how your character speaks is drastically different depending on which of these choices you pick. And so rightfully so, this person mentioned that, yeah, it feels like your character has some kind of multiple personality disorder or something, and it's kind of weird. I figured most people would probably keep consistently choosing the same type of choice every time anyway. But either way, still, it's not great for sure. So I wanted to fix that up. And the other problem as well, and this has to go into a general design philosophy that I have with my games, which is I want every single element in everything I make to be extremely purposeful. That it's there for a reason, there's a specific reason for it being there, and it's always something interesting and engaging that adds to the game. And that's another weakness that I think the dialogue system has right now. There's a lot of choices you make that have nothing to do whatsoever with making for a more engaging experience. It's like flavor text. It doesn't matter that much. There's a perfect example is at the end of the first level, you get your first rating from Genyu based on how you performed for the first time, and then you get the option to say something like, all right, I'm going to keep trying to get a perfect score, or come on, I deserved better than that, or something like that. And yeah, it's just the kind of thing that doesn't have much of an impact on anything and doesn't mean much, and it's, like I said, it's just like flavor text. So I was thinking, what's a way to make the dialogue system more engaging and yeah, just make it more like impactful. And so part of this design philosophy of wanting to make everything very purposeful is that I also lean very hard in the direction of quality over quantity. I would rather have very little of something if it means that it's going to feel a lot better, as opposed to having tons of something that's kind of like whatever. So just like that with the dialogue system, I don't want to have lots of choices for the player to make, but most of them don't really amount to much of anything different. I would rather have very few dialogue choices, but every time you make this choice, it's very meaningful. So What I had in mind instead was, first of all, get rid of the three personality system, consolidate it, and just come up with a single basic personality identity for the player character. He's supposed to be a young dude who's an up and coming fighter, has aspirations of becoming the best fighter on the island. And so I think just within the context of the game's culture, I'll just make him like chill, cool, young guy type of character. And I will write all of his lines with that context in mind so that there aren't any drastic changes in tone. I think one game that did this a lot was the Witcher games, where you can make a lot of different choices, but everything is always in the tone that Geralt would believably speak with. So that's one change I want to make it more consistent. And the second, and this is the one that I think is a little more experimental and risky, but kind of interesting, is to make it that every single choice that you make will be kind of like, not necessarily strictly speaking, but kind of like you're always either agreeing or disagreeing with the characters you're interacting with. So I want each choice to be something that will very clearly impact the nature of your relationship with that character. So no flavor text, no just like generic responses, and also no asking questions. This is another like big one. It's a lot of games like BioWare RPGs, I think, are kind of famous for this, but pretty much every game is like this, where a lot of the time dialogue choices you make when you first go up to a character and you start talking to them, it's basically just exposition dumps. You ask them, hey, what about this? What about that? And that's the kind of flavor text stuff I'm talking about that I want to try avoiding, and avoiding even doing any kind of exposition. So the trick behind this, though, means that I'm going to have I have to write things in a way where your character never asks questions. It's kind of weird, but he never asks questions, and he never even really initiates conversations. Instead, when you approach and interact with characters, they always have to be the ones starting a conversation with you, and they present to you they ask you questions, actually. Put it that way. It's like completely reversing the usual relationship. They will ask you questions or lead the conversation in a way that leads to questions of you, or it can be that sometimes when you interact with characters, they'll actually be in the middle of a conversation with someone else, and you'll get the option to butt in at some point and present your own opinion, and then be taking sides between like who you agree with and who you disagree with. Now, another cool thing about this is it goes back to what my very original design for the dialogue was way, way back at the beginning of the game, where I actually wanted you to be making philosophical choices through the game, where you'd be expressing your opinion on various kind of like moral dilemmas. So this isn't exactly like that. This isn't going to have any moral aspect to it at all necessarily, but just more so about making relationship decisions and expressing your opinion on just whatever random stuff you happen to be talking about with these characters. So, yeah, I think that will be a lot more interesting, a lot more impactful. It means that... Oh, right, I forgot one other thing. There was one other major problem also with my dialogue system, which was that sometimes you would initiate a conversation with a character, especially at the bar scene, and you ask a question. And so you would make that one choice at the beginning, but then the conversation would continue automatically after that. So you ask Genyu a question, he says something back to you, and then your character says something in response, but you don't pick the dialogue choice anymore. Instead, your character just continues to speak in the tone of whatever your first choice was. Now, the awkwardness of this is that when it switches between the two characters, when Genyu speaks, he has a voice actor, and then when it comes to your guy, there is no voice. That part is also kind of jarring and weird, and something I really noticed at the beginning when I made the game. Obviously, the point there is I want the player character to be the player's voice, and so I didn't want to give him a voice actor and conflict with that. But I think that works perfectly fine when you are making a choice actively. There, I don't think it's weird at all that you don't hear a voice actor, but I think it's totally weird when your character is giving an automatic response you didn't choose, and it just treats him like another character in the conversation, and now it's just suddenly everything goes mute with no voice acting for a moment while you read, and then, anyway, you get the point. So, so that's another thing I want to avoid. So what I'm thinking is... It's going to be a challenge, but yeah, I want to make it so your character is actually pretty mute. Not literally completely mute, because you will make many choices and say many things, but he will speak relatively little through the conversations and will only be presented with the opportunity to say things specifically when you are addressed, to answer a question that you're being asked of, or to butt into a conversation, and it doesn't have to be butting into a conversation with multiple characters, but any situation where you can come in with an opinion. But the point is, the context will always be you giving some kind of meaningful opinion on whatever conversation is happening, and making it so that your three choices are always choices that will clearly have an impact and clearly affect your relationship with whoever it is you're talking to. So the three choices you'll have now, rather than three different personality types, or even presenting like three different attitudes or anything like that, it'll just be a more generic, like your character always talks the same way, but one will be essentially, I agree with this person, or I agree with this other person, or it'll be, if you're talking to just one person, I agree with them or I disagree with them. Possibly I'll maintain a third option as well, which will be the neutral option. I feel like the neutral option, anything I can do, because part of the problem with this dialogue stuff, like in a lot of indie games that do this stuff, and not even indie games, but even AAA ones, part of the problem with giving dialogue choices, it becomes exponentially complicated. So you have to write exponentially more lines and come up with more different ways that things can play out, and that obviously gets impractically expensive, especially if you're an indie developer. So I'm thinking I might reduce it to just the agree disagree options, because that means I don't have to write a third line, and that way I could focus on, because another trick that a lot of games do to make it feel like you have more choices when you don't really, is they'll write a response to your two different, like you have two different choices, but they write a response so that it can fit regardless of which one you chose. But I think players kind of notice that, especially if you ever replay the game, you'll obviously notice that. And so that's another place where I kind of want to try to make everything feel really impactful and different whenever you make these choices, and try in all cases to avoid any kind of just pointless flavor stuff. So if I could keep it to just agree disagree all the time and force the player to have to, take a path one way or the other, I think that makes it a lot simpler for me to be able to always write completely totally different, distinct paths of conversation based on what the player says, without it getting too out of hand and crazy. Plus, by just in general limiting how often you even make conversational choices in the first place, that'll obviously help a lot as well. Yeah, so that's something else I've been thinking about. So that's my plan. Give him one identity, limit how frequently you actually make choices, and when you make those choices, always make them very impactful, high tension, meaningful decisions that will clearly affect the way the characters react to you and the nature of your relationship with them. And also, since you can now react with the characters like one at a time, you're not just like picking a personality, you are directly responding to like specific instances of specific situations having to do with specific characters. Under the hood, I can make it so it's no longer just which personality type you are, but rather you have like a point system with every character in the game individually. So you can develop different relationships with each character depending on what kind of choices you make. So I think that'll make it more interesting as well. And I can add more flavor stuff where the characters change their attitudes toward you based on the previous decisions you made that involved them, So still pretty ambitious, but I think it makes it much more realistic in terms of sheer amount of content or assets that I have to do to make it work. But challenging writing-wise to write a character like this and hopefully not make it weird or stupid that he doesn't actually say too much too often, but just interjects at these significant moments, and oftentimes the other characters, especially if it's just you and them talking, that they might have to monologue a little longer than you normally would in a conversation, perhaps. But yeah, anyway, so that's the idea, to update it to make it more in line with the new quality of the dialogue, and to make it in line with the quality of everything else in the game, I think. And just playing the demo recently and thinking about the changes I've made and looking at the script that I wrote over and over again over the past few days, like it's so much better. So much better than what I have now, and it's so much more fun and interesting. It's a little risky too. I will say the writing is a lot like edgier. It's not in a way where I'm like trying to be edgy, but just I feel like I won't lie, when I was first writing the script for a lot of the game, I was thinking a lot about the feeling of shows like Champloo and Cowboy Bebop, and thinking about things like how they don't really swear that much in it. They don't, there's certain like limitations to how, I don't know what the word I'm looking for here is, how violent, how, just like how mature it could be. You know, the limits of how extreme it can be in what it's depicting, because of the fact that it's a television show, not necessarily geared towards kids, but still an animated show, a television show, and has to deal with broadcasting standards and stuff like that. And because I was thinking about how those shows work, and I was trying so hard to capture the feeling of those shows, I think I maybe went too far in the direction of excluding like what my vision is. How do I just, in the real, not the real world because it's all fantasy, but if I were to really just completely let go and write these characters exactly the way that I think they would speak, and I can imagine this fantasy world in my head, and this is how I wrote the new dialogue. I just let my mind go, and I just imagine myself fantasizing if I'm sitting in the bar with these guys and they're talking to each other. How did their conversation actually go? How does a completely unfiltered Genyu actually talk, and what is his interactions with the players like? And and so this is what I mean by edgy. It's not like I'm trying to be edgy on purpose. It's like I think it's appropriate to his character, and it's appropriate to the context of the game and everything. And I think it's really funny and entertaining and a lot more enjoyable, and makes him a way more interesting character, and makes everyone in the game more interesting, because I rewrote everyone to have much more attitude in the way that they speak, and much more expressive about their personalities, and to make the story serve a more realistic depiction of their interactions, instead of serving like dumping exposition to the player, which is another thing that I think I did a little bit too much of. So yeah, so it's a little risky because it there's already a lot of dialogue I've written where Genyu's like a lot more abrasive, uh and in a lot of ways, like he's a fucking asshole. So, and he's meant to be that way, you know. And he's not like one dimensional in that way, but it's a big part of his character. And so I'm just thinking of it as risky in the sense of how some people might see it as like, oh, that they think I'm like trying to be edgy, or they misunderstand it like that, or that they're not even trying to be edgy, but that they'll just find it like needlessly offensive. But really, the biggest thing, because this was another thing that I thought a lot about as well when I was writing his character, was a piece of feedback that I got a lot when I was, and I don't know if this is one of those taste things or what, but when I finished making The Life of a Magical Circle and I first got feedback on people playing that game, I was surprised by how many people felt that the voiceovers and the lines that I wrote for that game, specifically when you lose, and then the commentary that the narrator makes to you, I was surprised at how often people felt it was like annoying and offensive. Like they thought that he was kind of making fun of them, and it made them feel bad, stuff like that. I had a handful of people who made comments to me about that. And so that was something, because they felt like, because they felt like it was demotivating. Considering the context of the game, they thought like, I don't know. They felt like it was, I guess they got this impression that they felt like it should be motivating me and making me inspired or something like that, which wasn't really the point of the game. But nonetheless, it was something that stuck with me, that a lot of people found him to be, I don't know, talking down to him, when I thought it was like pretty lighthearted stuff. So that was something I thought a lot about when I was writing Genyu's character in the game here. And that's why he's very like, he says a lot of lines and stuff in the demo that's much more like supportive. That's why I decided to make it so that the rating system is from 5 to 10, instead of you being able to even get like a 1 out of 10. You know, I basically went out of my way to make it so that I don't do anything that makes the player feel too bad. And I kind of like that. I do like that, and because I think there's a fine line to ride here in particular, because Genyu as a character has a vested interest in you actually being good at what you're doing and kicking ass, because if you aren't good, he's gonna get killed too, as part of the story. So that can work, and there's a certain sense in which I think it makes sense for him to be supportive, and perhaps even to be supportive in a way where it's kind of like tongue in cheek, where he's like sort of exaggerating a little bit, precisely because he needs you to believe in yourself, and not because he actually gives a shit about you. so, so I think that can work, and I think for the most part I'm gonna keep that, um, but yeah, anyway, it's a whole new direction. It's not a completely new direction. He is similar in some ways, but I feel like it's his personality will come off a lot stronger. But to be fair, that is what makes for an interesting character, right? And it is. I guess the risky part more than anything is just thinking of the people who have really enjoyed the game so far because they're fans of Bebop and Champloo and whatever. And those shows are cool and all, but the way I'm writing Genyu now and what I see like the final vision of the game as being for this and the other characters as well is it's something that's like quite a bit even more in the like mature direction than those shows. It's a lot more like I have like way darker humor in there, a lot more like really vulgar language, yeah, and things like that, which I don't know. I think people will still enjoy, but which it's a departure from those shows. You know what I mean? Like it's a lot darker than the stuff that's done in those shows, and that's where I wonder like, might I lose some audience, or will people dislike how strong the characters come off now in the new version of it? But I think for the people who enjoy it, they're gonna absolutely love it, and for me, this is way closer, I think, to my real vision for the game as well. So no matter what, I want to do it, and I'm really excited about the new way of doing these characters. It'll also be kind of funny, I'm thinking, to go back to David, who voiced Jones, for example, and show him the new script and be like, yeah, so you're gonna be saying fuck about 10 times more often. Not to say that it's like a non-stop swear fest, but like it's just you're gonna be way more like a proper gangster type character now, and it's gonna be a lot less subtle. But yeah. All right. Anyway, so that's all I got to say about that. My promotional campaign. I mentioned I was going to be working on some of my promotional videos for the game tonight. So throughout the day today, I continued messing around. And I was doing this last night as well, like playing all around with like, okay, because I've been talking about this for so long now. I have the script idea down, and I have the idea in my head down pat. I'm very happy with that. The trouble that I've been having is the framing, the framing of the shots in the video. I couldn't figure out where should I actually shoot this, what kind of lighting should I use. Everything that I was trying just wasn't working very well, and that's where I was just constantly experimenting. I mean, it's very, I'm very constrained here because all I've got is my relatively small apartment. I don't have any particularly big walls. I don't have, everything is kind of segmented, and so I wasn't sure how I should frame this all. And everything I was trying kept coming off as, I don't know, too serious, too weird. It wasn't like quite the right vibe that I had in mind for this. But I think finally I figured something out that I'm happy with. Part of the problem as well is that this needs to be something that's easy for me to reproduce because I want to make a lot of these. So I need to be able to, like, any day set up the shot and be able to quickly record this stuff and then edit it and pump it out, right? So it needs to be something that I can easily copy from day to day with new content, but without having to like do different whatever stuff all the time. And so yeah, I finally figured it out. I think I have this corner in my apartment over here that's like sort of, actually you can see these two like LED lamps that I have set up there right now because that was me experimenting with the lighting. But yeah, that corner over there is kind of like my library of books and stuff, and I've got some philosophy stuff there on the walls and some art and everything. So I feel like that's actually the best corner that I have where I can shoot this stuff and where it makes the most sense. And yeah, and I managed to take some shots, and I got just enough good shots with some like interesting lighting that looked good enough to me. So I still need to figure out exactly how I want to frame it and exactly how to do the lighting. So those are the last two things to do, but I'm happy to say I finally made progress, at least in knowing where to shoot this and at least roughly how to set the camera up and what looks like a good shot. So yeah, I need to do a little more experimenting there, but I think I'm very close to the end finally. And I'm definitely going to need a wireless mic for this, so I'm going to order that now. And yeah, that's pretty much it. And I have to start writing the script for my next full, proper YouTube video. Not one of these, but the weekly update, as I originally called it. I've got ideas on how I'm going to do that too, and I'm going to do that in the same format as I'm setting up for my short videos here. So it's kind of like a longer form version of the shorts that I'm going to be putting out. And yeah, so soon, promotional campaign, the rebranding will finally begin, and I hope people will enjoy that. In other news, my shower head broke. I was actually it was like I think some weeks ago that my old shower head, it started to kind of leak in a weird way. It sort of popped out from its original fixture. So recently I contacted my landlord. He came over, he replaced it with a new shower head, and that was only, I think it was last Sunday actually, exactly a week ago. And then today I was taking a shower and the thing just literally snapped off and water shot everywhere in my bathroom. So showerhead lasted exactly 1 week, so I just ordered a replacement, and I'm gonna get a reimbursed for that. I'm just gonna replace it myself rather than getting my landlord to come and spend time doing that again. Yeah, otherwise things are going well. I'm still happy with everything. My sister was gonna come visit this week as part of a layover for a flight she was taking somewhere else, but unfortunately the flight turned out to be unavailable. So but she said she'd be down to visit sometime later, possibly in September, so that'd be cool. Haven't seen her in a while. And as for my day-to-day, you know, it's weird because everything overall has been going excellently. My diet is still good, hitting the gym, feeling good with energy, feeling great mentally, really noticing just like, most especially recently, the past like couple weeks, I've made reference many times to the progress I've been making there, but really I'm feeling like my mind really has readjusted to like a whole new level of well-being. So that's awesome. But the one thing, as you might be able to tell, is still a sleep schedule, man. I just get so sucked in doing stupid stuff. But it's okay. Like I can feel how I can see what's happening and I'm in control, and I'm like so hyper aware of my slipping into old habits kind of thing. So I got it under control. I'm not gonna let it go too far. Tomorrow I shall 100% fix it for sure. But still, in the grand scheme of things, for me, with all the stuff that I have been working on over the past, since I basically started making these videos, actually, I think you can, if you go through those and watch them all, you can see the progression of my issues with this stuff. This is the least of my problems. This is the best I've been by far. When I'm at a point where literally like my only problem right now is occasionally I slip up on like the exactness of my routine for my sleep schedule specifically. Bro, that is ideal. That's like the only issue I have. It's no problem. It's not even, to some extent, it's almost not even that much of a problem, because even when I do go to bed late, I just end up sleeping in the next day. So I don't really lose too much sleep. Occasionally here and there I might if it's a little too late, but for the most part I'll just sleep in and then I feel fine anyway. The only real problem is that late at night like this, where I start to feel like my body's really well tuned, I think, to going to bed as the sun is setting and waking up when it rises. And so I do feel like a little off or overly tired at night. Like right now, it's like 1:30 in the morning. Yeah, I can feel that it's like not ideal. But during the day, while I'm doing stuff, I feel perfectly fine. So anyway, I honestly, to some extent, almost even care more than anything about a proper routine because, well, partly to be in sync with my actual body's desires. Like I actually despise it when I can see the sun rising because I stayed up too late. It's the worst feeling to be in the world. But for me, more than anything, honestly, it's like a social thing. I just think about how in the future, like, dude, I can't be in a relationship with someone if I fucking go to bed at like 4 in the morning and wake up at like 1 p.m., you know? I can't be in a relationship with someone. I can't like, dude, can I even be like roommates with someone if I ever had to do that? Like not even in the context of a relationship, just in general, if I decide to, try to save money by moving in with someone else or something like that. Like most people probably don't sleep till 12. Most people don't have the luxury to even choose to do that if they wanted to. That's just my weird situation. Oh, yo, okay. There's one other thing I wanted to talk about. Okay, so I was thinking today about. Okay, first of all, a little preamble here of how I even ended up in the situation I'm at. Because I don't know if I've ever told the full story, but have given small bits of it here and there. I was working at Digital Extremes on Warframe for like 7 years. I lived in London, Ontario. And long story short, thanks to my parents buying a condo like probably more than a decade ago now, I was able to take over the condo. And essentially, they gifted it to me. So extremely good fortune for me. And I have to thank them for that. But yeah, so I decided at some point I wanted to quit at Digital Extremes. I want to start doing my own thing, right? And at first, when I quit, I didn't use money from the condo at all. I was using my own personal savings that I'd saved up over many years from living there and working there. And so that was my plan, to use that and then I had like a bunch of backup options while I pursued this new riskier path. And it was at a certain point after I quit, like soon after I quit, that I realized, wait, thanks to the absolute absurdity of the housing market, especially up here in Canada, the value of that condo that I owned had gone up enormously, like literally almost 4 times the value than what it was originally purchased for. So I realized that in some sense, I was essentially sitting on a gold mine. And that is where I got the funds to be able to do what I'm doing now. So I sold that condo, and that was what led to me trying to revolutionize my whole life, moving out here to Montreal and working on my games and all that. And what I was thinking about today was that in some sense, I actually did something enormously stupid there. Because I realized, okay, I had a good salary while I was working at Digital Extremes. We were working remotely at that time because this is during the pandemic, towards the end of it. And I realized, I could have done this in a way where I kept working there, keep working at Digital Extremes. In my spare time, continue working on my first game, which was something I did all the time while I was working there anyway. Ask for a modest increase to my salary, which was already pretty good, but I think I could have pretty easily negotiated an even higher one. And then guarantee myself a fully remote position, because that was something some other people there were already doing as well. And then sell my place and move out here to Montreal while continuing to work remotely for them. And I would have had a comfortable salary and a shit ton of money sitting in the bank, which I could then just go and put into like some investments. And then I could have just kept doing that while working on my game until I finish it, learn the lessons from that. And after all of that, finally, okay, once I've had that experience, quit my job at DE, start doing what I'm doing now, start making the game that I'm making now. And I would have had like at least twice as much money, like a lot more money. And I would have been in like an unbelievably more secure and comfortable position. And so I'm laughing to myself thinking about this today. And, did I do something incredibly stupid by rushing into all this and just jumping headfirst into this huge risk? But obviously, first of all, there's a big trade-off here, which is that it would have taken me a lot longer to get to where I am. I would have no doubt spent at least an extra year to finish my first game. So it would have delayed my solo career by a lot. And there's also a risk possibly that it would have taken even longer than that, because that's assuming I continued to work consistently in my spare time on that project. But you could easily say that, well, I would have moved to Montreal. I'm in this new place. I want to make new friends. I want to do exciting new stuff. That was what that was all about. And I've got like tons of money that I can safely and comfortably live a very nice lifestyle, and I'm still pulling a salary that's more than enough for me to pay for my day to day and to keep saving even more money into my account, it's easy to see how I could have easily become like complacent again, still more comfortable with myself, and then just like tried to live like a baller while telling myself I'm gonna quit and do my game thing at some point, and like working on my game here and there in my spare time. But the point is everything would have been so comfortable that I could easily see myself being tempted into just continuing to live my life the way that I used to, playing everything safe, everything regularly. So I don't regret that I made this decision. And I think that a lot of what I've experienced and gone through over the past few years is only possible because of the fact that I took such an absurd risk and that I just dived headfirst into this and decided to go all in and invest every last penny I had into what I'm doing here. And whatever happens, happens. So yeah, anyway, I don't regret it. And I think to some extent, if you want to do something like this, at some point you have to do something irrational and take a leap. Because if you're always playing it safe, I mean, it'll never necessarily make sense at any point to quit, right? I mean, it would have been safer to do it, but I don't know. I guess I'm just saying, what's the fun in that, you know? It's a little uncomfortable being in a situation now where in a year from now, I could be like, very close to just being completely broke. But it also just really lights a massive fire under your ass, like it's like every day I'm constantly thinking that I gotta make sure I get this shit done today. I gotta make sure that this gets done on time. I gotta really make sure that I give it my all and that I'm on top of everything and all of that. And yeah, I don't know, it's easy to look back and be like, wow, I could have done this in such a smarter and more secure and safer way. But at the same time, I always like to avoid having any kinds of regrets, because I always think to myself that regrets are really just an expression of you not accepting yourself for who you were back then and why you made the decisions that you did. So I don't like to have regrets. And even if maybe that would have been the smarter or the safer way of doing things, I think it takes away from a big part of what's made me who I am now, And yeah, and who knows if I would have gotten myself to the position that I'm in now if I hadn't done things the way that I did. Now that I'm in this excellent state of mind and seeing things clearly and feeling like I finally returned to myself and figured out into the highest level possible, at least so far in my life, exactly how to keep moving forward. I can't say for sure that I would have had the experiences that led me to that if I had played everything safe. I think I very easily could have still been stuck going through the same motions for a much longer period of time before really waking up as a person, waking up to my potential and actualizing myself. I think it was necessary to go a little crazy and throw myself into the deep end in order to force myself to change and to wake up and to have to take maximum responsibility and push myself to the limits. Of course, it's possible that I'm coping and that actually the safe way is the smart way to do it. But I don't think so. I feel like I very rarely hear about people who are super successful who just kind of like did everything the smart way. I feel like almost everyone that I respect, that I know of, when I hear about their stories, like there was always some point at which they did something incredibly risky and stupid and just went with it and whatever, see what happens, And somehow it works out. Somehow putting yourself in that situation forces you to adapt and figure things out. Okay. I'm pushing it too far here. It's 1:37, but I think I had a good talk here. I think that was more revelatory than most of these videos I've posted so far. But yeah. All right. See you tomorrow.